Hey, Civic Scholars, how we doing? Here's the lesson for today. Again, finishing up stuff with the legislative branch, hopefully today for the most part. Piggybacking a little bit on the stuff that we have learned about the three branches already. And also on Monday, what we went over with the legislative branch. And just pushing forward a little bit with that as we wind down the last few days of the semester, talking about those three branches. Still focusing in, though, today on the legislative branch to finish things up with that. And remember, that's just the equivalent of our Congress, right? So first things first, though, we're going to watch some CNN 10 before we get into some of the other stuff. Here we go. Pay attention. Turn your volume up.
Hi, I'm Carl Azuz for CNN 10. Welcome to the show. Results from yesterday's Senate races in Georgia were still coming in when we produced today's program. You can get the latest at CNN.com, and we'll bring you up to speed on them later this week. Right now, though, geopolitical tensions involving the Middle Eastern nation of Iran are...
Oh, internet.
Up to speed on them later this week. Right now, though, geopolitical tensions involving the Middle Eastern nation of Iran are simmering. In December of 2019, militias supported by Iran made a number of attacks on American targets in the Middle East. The United States responded by launching airstrikes against Iranian militias. The U.S. government blamed protesters trained by Iran for trying to storm an American embassy in neighboring Iraq. And on January 3rd of 2020, the U.S. launched an airstrike that killed an Iranian general named Qasem Soleimani, along with several other people. The U.S. blamed General Soleimani for the deaths of hundreds of Americans and their allies and said he was planning new attacks. But Iran called the airstrike an act of terrorism and promised it would get revenge. There's another issue here as well called the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. It's also known as the Iran nuclear deal. It was a controversial agreement reached in 2015 between Iran and 6 other countries led by America's Obama administration. In the deal, Iran agreed to limit its nuclear program, which the other nations opposed, and they agreed to remove their sanctions on the Middle Eastern nation, which were worth billions to Iran's economy. But in 2018, America's Trump administration pulled the U.S. out of the Iranian nuclear agreement, calling it a bad deal. And Iran recently went back to enriching uranium at a higher purity, which could help the country build an illegal nuclear weapon, though Iran says its nuclear program is peaceful. The U.S. and Iran have been at odds for decades.
There's little love lost between Iran and the United States.
Well, it is now Washington's move after Iran
Relations between the two countries have been troubled for more than half a century. But where did the conflict start? To understand that, we need to go back to the 1950s and this man, Mohammad Mossadegh. Mossadegh, who became prime minister in 1951, was key in nationalizing the country's British-controlled oil fields.
British experts were granted a concession to...
As a result, the British enlisted the US to get rid of him. In 1953, the CIA and MI6 backed a coup ousting Mossadegh, restoring instead Iran's monarch, the Shah. But the Shah became unpopular at home for his lavish spending, ostentatious lifestyle, and the torture of dissidents. That all changed in 1979. The Islamic Revolution ushered in change, forcing the Shah to flee the country. The high-ranking Shia religious leader Ayatollah Khomeini returned from exile in February to become Iran's supreme leader. Later that year, amid death to America chants, Iranian students stormed the US embassy in Tehran, taking 90 people hostage, including 66 Americans. Ultimately, all the hostages were released in a siege lasting 444 days. But the damage was done. The US designated Iran a state sponsor of terrorism 3 years later. In the 1980s, Iran and Iraq became embroiled in a war. The US was officially neutral, but in a bid to contain Iran, started backing Iraq and its leader Saddam Hussein. The move put the US and Iran even further at odds. The tension ratcheted up toward the end of the Iran-Iraq War. In 1988, the US shot down an Iranian passenger plane over Iranian territorial waters when it mistakenly identified it as a fighter jet. It killed all 290 people on board. When Iraq invaded Kuwait in 1990, the US and Iran suddenly shared Saddam Hussein as a common enemy, although it did little to improve relations. US sanctions against Iran accelerated under the Clinton administration. In 2002, a year before the start of the Iraq War, President Bush included Iran in what he called the axis of evil.
States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil.
Due to concerns Tehran was trying to develop nuclear weapons to threaten the US.
10-second trivia. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania is home to America's first what? Pizza museum, log cabin, White House, or movie theater? The nation's first Nickelodeon or public movie theater opened in Pittsburgh in 1905. It was a hit. Nickelodeons, which only cost a nickel to get into, rapidly opened across the country, and movie theaters have been a popular part of American culture ever since. But that popularity has been knocked down by a major 1-2 punch of online movie streaming and nationwide closures because of the coronavirus pandemic. And while many theaters have reopened or are planning to in the days ahead, it's anyone's guess when or if they'll see the level of attendance they saw before their problems set in.
We had a number of films in movie theaters at the time that the world went into quarantine, and Trolls World Tour was poised, ready to come out in the movie theaters. So, we had spent the majority of our marketing dollars, and we needed to figure out how to monetize the film.
When Donna Langley, chairman of Universal Pictures, made the unprecedented decision to send Trolls World Tour straight to digital, the industry was shocked.
Any idea of shortening the theatrical window with exhibition was hugely unpopular. We found ourselves between a rock and a hard place. We really had no choice.
Were there any concerns at the time about how the theaters would take it?
They were not happy. They quote unquote boycott the film, but it didn't really matter because there wasn't a theatrical footprint really to speak of. And it came at a time that families really needed something to do to occupy their children.
The Trolls sequel made more money for the studio in just 3 weeks of its digital release than the original did during 5 months in theaters. Universal has since made a deal with AMC to shorten the window of theater exclusivity in the future.
Why is that deal so important?
When you're marketing a movie, it's a huge expense, right? We were waiting 90 days before that movie could come out on DVD or into the home, which meant you had to market the movie all over again. So eradicating that and being able to pull that date up to 17 days, it means that we can graft off of that first theatrical marketing blast, if you will.
Recently, CNN's parent company Warner Media said it would stream all of next year's movies on HBO Max at the same time they hit theaters, marking a huge shift in the industry.
Do you believe it's going to be good for theaters in the long run?
Every time we launch a movie, it's like launching a small business. And, with all of this disruption and with consumers migrating to streaming and uncertainty about what it's all going to look like on the other side of this, we need to keep our distribution ecosystem healthy. And the other thing I love about it is it gives optionality to the audience. And so it just makes sense that we're bringing the film business into the modern era, and we're meeting the consumer and the audience where they are and where they want to be.
What does the future of movie theaters look like to you?
I do think that there's signs of life on the other side of the pandemic. If you look to Asia, Japan and China, who are ahead of the curve in terms of COVID, their movie going, it's not back to normal numbers, but they've had some local language movies there that have done really well. I think there's probably some conversation around what movies deserve that theatrical release and what's going to get people out into the movie theater. But that was happening pre-COVID. That sort of big blockbuster movie going was the thing that was driving hordes of people globally to the movie theater. And some of the smaller movies were struggling a little bit, and particularly with the disruption of streaming. I think we're going to continue to see those trends.
Why do you believe that after this pandemic, which has rattled people to their core, that people will really come back to theaters.
When tough times, people look to the movies to take them out of their reality and to inspire them. And I think that that is going to be true more than ever on the other side of the pandemic.
There are many things rescue dogs can do. Talking is not one of them. Or is it?
You can trigger an avalanche big enough to bury you in Summit County right now.
A serious message that has gone to the dogs.
We're seeing the weakest snowpack in our state since 2012.
In Colorado, rescue workers, the humankind, are trying to get people to pay attention to their warnings about dangerous conditions. So they're using the animals and a bit of technology to get the word out. Because while heavy snow is no problem for the Siberian Husky, the American Eskimo dog, the Alaskan Klekai, or the St. Bernard, people may have something to fur. So rescuers may be barking up the right tree with these mono dogs designed to bolto people over as long as they don't hit the Malamute button. Before we leave today, we're talking about Sullivan High School. It's in another snowy place known as Chicago, Illinois. Thank you for watching. For a chance to get your school mentioned, please subscribe and leave a comment at youtube.com/CNN10. I'm Carl Azus for CNN.
All right, there we go. Yeah, some interesting stuff there, especially with the movies. You guys know what it costs to go to a movie? Holy smokes. It's like $10 to go and $5 for a pot of popcorn, and it's expensive. Just stream something live right on your Netflix or something like that for $2. It's a little more inexpensive, but hey, it's all good. The first thing he did mention, though, that they haven't released yet, we talked a little bit the other day about those Georgia runoff elections in terms of politics and those 2 Senate seats that were up for re-election yesterday in the state of Georgia. And those were so key because they could swing who is in the majority in terms of Republicans and Democrats in the Senate. And I believe as of this morning, most of the votes have been counted. And one of the seats, I think, has been what we say called. Like they're projecting, they're pretty sure that one of the seats did go to one of the Democrats, and the other one, I don't think all the votes were tallied up yet and a final vote was done, but they were like extremely close. Both of the races were. So you can keep paying attention to that. We'll talk more about that maybe on Friday when I am back. Okay, so as we're moving on, as we're just talking about senators, like what do they actually do? Like, we know they go to Washington, D.C. We know they maybe write bills and laws, but that's not the only thing they do. In fact, they spend very little of their time actually in the Capitol building voting on stuff. A lot of their time is out doing other things, and that's senators and also people in the House of Representatives. So I think it's important for us to see what they do on a daily basis, and so we appreciate more what they do, because I think a lot of the times we think they just show up to the Capitol building every day, vote, write some bills and laws, and then go home and go to bed. And that's so far beyond the truth of what they're all about. So here are some clips here that I've got. We're going to watch one about 5-minute clip here, a day in the life of Senator James Lankford. And then we are also going to watch a day in the life of Congressman Rodney Davis. James Lankford is one of the 2 senators from the state of Oklahoma. Congressman Rodney Davis is a U.S. representative from the state of Illinois. And so we're going to watch these clips here on these 2 guys and what a typical day for them looks like. James Lankford will be in the news a little bit today because I believe he is one of the probably what they think is 12 senators that are objecting to the election results from our presidential election when they are supposed to be officially counted today in Congress. And senators and people in the House of Representatives, they are allowed to say, hey, we don't agree with the vote that occurred in certain states. And it sounds like he might be one of those 12 senators that's going to maybe do that. We'll keep an eye on that. We'll talk about it again Friday. But here we go. Here is a day in the life of a senator, James Lankford.
Good morning. It's a little bit before 8 o'clock right now, Washington, D.C. time, a little before 7 in Oklahoma. I'm walking in. It's a Wednesday morning. Typically, the start of my day is early in the morning. I've already gone through all the news of the day in my own personal time, had my own personal quiet time, got ready, headed over to the office, dropped off my stuff, and now I'm heading into a morning Bible study. It's about 25 senators that meet for prayer time on Wednesday mornings from 8 to a little before 9. And it's been a tradition, it's been around since the 1950s, actually. It's a bipartisan gathering, but it's the way I start this particular day. Each day is a little bit different. Welcome to Wednesday, though. Get a chance to walk you through the day. Wednesday mornings is always Java with James. That's a time where any Oklahoman, whether they live in D.C., visiting D.C., up for business, up for a conference, can just stop by and we just have coffee and get a chance just to visit about whatever anybody wants to talk about. Homeland Security Governmental Affairs Committee. We had a committee hearing today, which happens about once a month. That's what's called a business meeting. That means we're actually going through bills, marking them up, doing amendments, and then trying to move them to the floor. We did 15 total bills in the markup today. 4 of those were my bills. 3 of them specifically I'd written, and one of them I was the lead Republican on a Democrat bill. So sat down with one of our team members, Adam. He helps us with foreign affairs budgeting and all things that are international relations. He and I were working through some funding issues on our foreign funding, which is incredibly important that we get it efficient, we get it right, and we're not throwing money to different countries around the world. The vote today was actually a very straightforward procedural vote on the Associate Attorney General to be able to advance that. Then tomorrow we'll actually do the final vote. Tuesdays and Wednesdays, all Republican senators meet together for lunch to be able to go through the main policy issues. We spent the entire hour just walking through different aspects about healthcare, what's going to move, what's not going to move, what are our key things, what are the non-negotiables on healthcare policy, and then also talked about different options that are coming. A lot like the business meeting that we had earlier today, this was a business meeting with Indian Affairs. We had 3 bills that we were marking up today, including one on Indian education, and try to be able to incentivize teachers to work with Bureau of Indian Education schools. During the course of the day, there's a lot of moving back and forth between the Senate office buildings and across the street going to the Capitol for multiple meetings. Sometimes you're in a hurry, and so I'll move through the subway that's underground between the Capitol and the Senate office buildings. I serve on the Intelligence Committee. This particular briefing circled all around our military and what's happening worldwide in our preparedness. It's also essential that we get together behind closed doors and ask some of those hard questions together. 2 years ago, started working on providing greater oversight to our spending and our foreign affairs related to Central America, specifically Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. So meeting with the ambassadors, foreign ministers, assistants to their leadership and the president today in Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. Throughout the course of the day, you get stopped in the hallways often by press that want to be able to ask a random question from print media. This afternoon, I was doing stand-up interviews with Fox News, a special report, also a Wolf Blitzer with CNN, and several others that also caught me in between. It's always a busy news day. It seems lately they're busier than usual, but this gives me the opportunity to be able to explain some of the things that are happening inside and serving on the Senate Intelligence Committee dealing specifically with the Russia investigation, which is always a part of every day, but that's also in a classified setting every day. So that was the focus of a lot of the interviews this afternoon. It's about 7:30 right now at night. Finished up the major meetings that I've got where I'm actually meeting with somebody else. It's now transition time for me. I'm gonna run and grab some dinner real quick, and then I'll sit down and go through what I affectionately call my homework packet. It's all the information, the study materials for tomorrow's meetings, things that were left for me in preparation, research that I'm going to do. This is the time that I get to do writing in preparation, speaking on the floor of the Senate tomorrow. I've got to finish up writing that speech, so I'll do all that tonight. My day typically ends somewhere around midnight to 1. They're long days here. By the time I get dinner and then spend 2 or 3 hours in study, call home, definitely get a chance to chat with Cindy and my daughter tonight as well. So by the time that gets done, it's usually pretty late. Then we'll restart again tomorrow. My first interview tomorrow morning is actually at 7:20 tomorrow morning back here in the office. So another day in D.C.
All right, so there you saw the kind of the day in the life of a senator. He said that's a busy day and it's different all the time, but it's on the move. You saw he's up early in the morning. He said his day typically ends at midnight or 1 a.m. Notice at the end he said, "Yeah, I'm going to call home to Cindy and his daughter." So these Congress people, they're spending a lot of their time in Washington, D.C., but then they're also traveling back and forth back to home as well. So it's not an easy necessarily schedule, but you saw he was not only, he talked about his next day, he was going to be in more meetings. He's going to be in some smaller group meetings, which they call their committees that they're on. We'll talk more about what committees are, where they start to write legislation and laws and bills about specific areas. All senators and all people in the House of Representatives are on certain committees. So they're meeting with other senators. He said, he's got that Java with James, where he's meeting with his constituents, other people from Oklahoma, once a week. So they're in meetings. They're in the Senate. You saw him riding that little cool subway back and forth from the Capitol building to the building, kind of it's like across the street where a lot of the senators have their offices. It's an underground like tunnel subway thing. It's pretty cool, so that they can move back and forth quickly and easily. But it's a busy day. It's a lot of work, a lot of hours. And you'll see the same thing here when we look at the day in the life of U.S. Representative Rodney Davis from Illinois. Obviously, these are a couple years old. They were talking about the Russian investigation, so that had been back like 3 years ago or so. This one from Rodney Davis is also the same. It's a couple years old, but you'll see some similar stuff about how busy these guys are.
And thanks for being with me today. I'm looking forward to the day, spending it here in Washington, D.C. Going to be a busy day today. Usually like to start my day with a little bit of exercise, clears my head. Enjoy listening to some of my 1980s and 90s music, mixed in with a little bit of country. Nobody can go wrong with Jason Aldean.
Morning, Congressman. How are you?
Hey, David, I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Boy, all kinds of things going on in the House. How are we doing with the transportation bill? I see they've been pulling money out of underground fuel storage tanks, that fund, to keep the Federal Highway Trust Fund solvent. What all's going on with that?
Well, it's not my first choice, but we've got to have, we've got to keep the construction projects already underway in Illinois. We got to keep them going so we keep our trade and labor folks employed, and we don't have any work stoppages that are put forth for political gain. We passed the bill yesterday that's going to patch the Highway Trust Fund until next May, but that means that Republicans and Democrats out here, David, we've got to seriously sit down and talk about long-term transportation needs, and that's an issue we've been talking about for over 2 years on this show, and it's an issue that I came to Washington to help solve, and I hope, just like WRDA and the Farm Bill, we're able to get it done pretty quickly.
Starting off the day, we've got a great opportunity to actually go meet some friends this morning for breakfast. We're starting a Transportation Committee markup, which is the committee process, and I'm proud to be a member of that committee. We're going to deal with some pretty important pieces of legislation that will come out of that committee, hopefully get to the floor very quickly. The rest of the day is jam-packed. You'll get to see that we live life on about 15 to 20-minute increments out here. And thanks for joining me the rest of the day. I'm looking forward to showing you a day in the life of a member of Congress from Central Illinois. Great to be at our transportation infrastructure markup. That's the initial process, getting a bill through the committee onto the floor of the House, and hopefully they're going to become law as we address some issues that are in the jurisdiction of our committee. Some issues that were usually tertiary issues where we're just rubber stamping some expenses that the federal government uses for infrastructure improvements throughout this country. But then we got into some raucous debate on the Clean Water Act and EPA's overreach, especially when it comes to permitting issues and making retroactive permit decisions, pulling those permits after they've already been issued, when jobs have been created and mines have been been open. How's everything going?
Good. Wet.
Yes, it is. Cool. Local folks from the district, we're out here for the Illinois Corn Growers Conference. Grant Nolan, who chairs my Ag Advisory Committee, and Grant is a spitting image of his dad, one of my mentors, former Senator Dwayne Nolan. Grant's a great young leader in the corn growers, and I was glad to have him out here with my good friends, the Reeds. Mr. and Mrs. Jim Reed were out here. They're longtime friends from Piatt County, and then from Christian County. My longtime friend Len Curzine was with them, and to be able to talk issues and talk about the successes we had with the Farm Bill and with WRDA and where we're going in this, this Congress to address some of their future needs. It was a very good experience, and it's always good to see friends out here in Washington and share this opportunity to help them help me govern. We're going to a Republican Study Committee meeting over in the Capitol. Actually get a chance to meet Justina Pelletier, who was taken from her family in Boston. And unfortunately, we're having to pass a law and make sure that kids like Justina are never taken again. All right, heading back in to meet with my good buddy Kyle from Lutheran Schools Association. Come on. Hey guys, sorry. You guys having fun yet? Sure are. Are you? Yes. Rodney. Dan Davis. Dan, nice to see you. Woodsville, Florida. Rodney Davis, I'm from Illinois. You guys have Mr. Nugent up here? Yes, that's who we're here. All right, tell him that he can't use these bathrooms anymore. This is not either one. Either one. This is right in my hallway. You tell him I said that. All right, I will. All right, you guys can feel free to use them anytime. Well, thank you. Him? No. No? Okay. Hey, great day. You too. He's a good man. Hi. Did you tour the Capitol yet? We have. Awesome. Well, have fun. Thanks.
What's up there, man?
Come on, dude. Come on in.
Nice to see you.
You too. You too.
Yeah, very nice meeting you.
All right, getting ready to go down and vote. Heading down to the Capitol now, to the floor. We're going to vote on our 7th appropriations bill. This is what gets us back to our constitutional appropriations process. And then I'm going to be in the chair. So turn on C-SPAN. Reports that the committee has had under consideration the bill H.R. 5016. In pursuant to House... I had one of my most interesting days having the privilege of chairing the House proceedings today. During a motion to recommit, got a little raucous. And it was pretty fun because you have what are now your friends on both sides of the aisle just laughing and cheering and booing and what have you. It's the things you think the House should do.
When entrepreneurs and businesses succeed in this country, what happens?
Gentlemen's time has expired.
When workers get good paying jobs, what happens?
Gentlemen's time has expired.
Let me just tell the gentleman that he'll be happy to know that we've already taken care of all his concerns in this bill.
After it was all over, it was great to be able to stand in the chair and watch everybody kind of shake hands and laugh because that's what governing is all about. It's arguing for your point, not sacrificing your core principles and values, but ensuring that you move ahead and govern in the end and not take yourself too seriously. Now, there's a lot of talk when you turn on the 24-hour news cycle, all you hear is that we fight, we fight, we fight. Well, during this whole raucous debate, I had to gavel a guy and tell him his time has expired. He didn't even know, he couldn't hear me because everybody was screaming on the floor. He's a friend of mine, he's a freshman, he's a Democrat, Rick Nolan out of Minnesota. This is the vote he lost. So I got the vote tally from the chair, and I wrote a little note on there that said, Rick, your time has expired. P.S. Good speech. But I'm going to give this to you. And out here in Washington, D.C., you wouldn't think that we, Republican me, Democrat him, if you turn on the TV, you wouldn't think we'd even communicate with each other. But we sit right by each other in the Transportation Committee. We don't agree on every single issue, but most importantly, we don't disagree on most of the issues. Chair, is a contentious motion to recommit, kind of one of the circus-like days that are most fun out here in Washington when it comes to the floor. And now, just got done speaking to a group of agribusiness leaders, agribusiness women that are out here for a conference, and now going to meeting with Speaker Boehner and the rest of my freshman class. All right, we just had a chance to meet with some folks regarding highway issues with my good buddy David Valadeo from California. This is an opportunity for us to get together. We're going to take him to go see some folks from Bloomington Normal who are concerned about economic development issues. You got that in California.
We do. We have some issues there too.
Yeah, everything, not just everything.
Sunnier in California.
The tall guys get to sit up.
They started talking like that.
You didn't know what to do. You were scared.
I was scared. I was trying to make. I was trying to make the house get back to because he's deaf.
He said he didn't hear you. I told him today. I said,
"Did you hear me?"
Oh, I heard you, of course, but no, he didn't hear you. He thought that you were calling everybody else.
I was, and then I said, "Your time's expired."
He didn't hear you.
Oh, I know he didn't hear. That's why he stood there.
Yeah, no, he wasn't trying to be a jerk. Rodney Davis, great guy from Republican. We love him anyway. One of the greatest guys here. And today he was the speaker, sitting in the speaker's chair, and one of our guys was doing one of these little spiels, a little speech. And then his time was up, so Rodney's gaveling him down. But he can't hear because we're all being rowdy. So he stays down for a minute. So Rodney's like, and he's hammering, but he didn't hear it.
But, the funny thing was, everybody's like, well, why'd you let it go? I said, because we got to let the house be the house.
Yeah.
We came here to actually be a little raucous. We don't want to be the House of Lords. We don't want to be the most expensive nursing home in America.
Wow.
Kind of at the end of the night. I hope you enjoyed spending the day with me. This is a great opportunity for me. I'm back in my office. I'm ready to maybe go down and do a load of laundry in the basement and give me an opportunity to relax a little bit, go to bed, and wake up and pretty much do it all over again. So enjoy. I hope you enjoy seeing this opportunity to see what it is to be a member of Congress for a day, and this is truly reflective. And I also got to tell you, it's a privilege for me, man. I hope you get a chance to meet more of my friends in the future, like David Valadeo, who are in this video, and also friends like David Joyce and so many others that we get to see, and I want them to experience Central Illinois too. So thank you, God bless you all, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to serve you.
All right. So there was the day in the life of another U.S. congressman. He's in the House of Representatives, obviously. And as we talk about, like, the stuff that they actually do, you talked about, you saw him in a lot of meetings and committees that dealt with agriculture, which makes sense, right? He's from Central Illinois, which is an area of agriculture, of farming and stuff like that. So, hey, these guys, these ladies, these gentlemen, they don't live easy lives in a sense. They're moving all over the place. They're in meetings. They're in there in the Capitol building doing votes. This guy actually got a chance to kind of be like the acting Speaker of the House for the day and run things, because the Speaker of the House at the time was John Boehner. Was unable to do it for a while, so this guy got to fill in his seat for the day, which he said was really exciting for him. But they're active. I mean, their days, as you saw, he got up at 6 a.m, and then it was like 11:15 at night, and he was just kind of getting back to his office where he actually, you heard him say he's doing his laundry there, which tells you that a lot of the time they are spending, like, living in their offices in Washington, D.C., because they're just there so much. So they're busy. They're busy people. And so hopefully you get a little better chance there to see actually what they do on a day-to-day basis. Okay, the last thing we're going to go over today, we did start to talk a little bit about gerrymandering and reapportionment in class the other day, but I want to quick walk you guys through a few more slides about that and what that is. before I cut you loose here a little bit. So here we go. Follow along with me as we roll. This isn't long. You're going to want to pay attention here. This is going to be posted for you in case you need to come back to it. So again, reapportionment and gerrymandering. Yeah, this is giving me all sorts of trouble. There we go. Okay, so reapportionment, that's when they reapportion. We chop back up each state, like it says here, into those new congressional districts, and they do this every 10 years. We talked the other day about that thing called the census that we take every 10 years. We just took one this past year in 2020, and it's based on the census, and the census basically takes the population of the country and then of each state, and based on the amount of people from each state, we then figure out how many representatives in Congress, or at least in the House of Representatives, each state is going to get. This came about from the Reapportionment Act of 1929. It limited the House, so it said, okay, we're gonna have a set number in the House of Representatives at 435, and it stayed that way since then. So still today, almost 90 years later, we're still at that same number, 435 people in the House of Representatives, and that's what gets reapportioned or split up every 10 years with the census. Right now, again, we've got 14 from the state of Michigan. We'll see after the census from last year if that changes. The Census Bureau, which is a part of our federal government, issues a report, and both Congress and the President must approve the plan. As a state population shifts, so do those seats. And I drew that up on the board a little bit, and I'll do that again on Friday just to kind of show what could happen. Because a state's population could stay the same, but if people move within the state, we still need to redraw those congressional districts. Because remember, in each one of those 14 districts in the state of Michigan, there are supposed to be the same amount of people living in each one. Now, obviously, they can't do that exactly, but it's got to be pretty close. So after 2010, some states gained seats in the House of Representatives. Many stayed the same. Others lost some. You can see us. We were in the lost category. We went from 15 people in the House of Representatives down to 14 people. So we get to the term redistricting. Once seats have been reapportioned, the district lines must be redrawn, and we call that redistricting. So for instance, Texas used to have 32 congressional districts before the 2010 census. So from 2000 to 2010, they now have 36. So they needed to add 4 districts, and so they needed to redraw those district lines. Here's how that happens. The districts must roughly proportional. So there must be one person for one vote. And that means basically you got to have equal amount of people in each district. Malapportionment is what we call it. It's unconstitutional. That means you're creating vastly unequal districts. States must create districts that are pretty much the same with each other. It says, for example, District 1 may have a population of 1 million, while District 2 has only 100,000 people. Well, that's not equal. Okay. The people in District 2, in a sense, have more say. There are less people that are being represented there. So you got to try to make those districts the same. And a district must be contiguous, which means like you can't have 2 pieces of a district here and it like not being continuous. The whole district has to somehow match up in terms of the area. And redistricting plans may not discriminate on the basis of race. So you can't draw district lines keeping certain races separate from each other or putting them all together in one area. There have been rules and laws made about that. There are some important court cases here that have gone to the Supreme Court about gerrymandering and redistricting. We don't need to necessarily know those so much. And then so gerrymandering. excuse me. This is the practice of manipulating or changing district boundary lines in an effort to secure an advantage for a political party. So if a state draws new districts to maybe favor the Democrats or favor the Republicans because they know that a bunch of Republicans live in an area or a bunch of Democrats live in an area, that's illegal. They call that gerrymandering. That's usually evident in oddly shaped districts that look just really goofy how they're drawn. Like you can tell, like, what were they doing there? Why did they draw that district like that? You can see some of those districts here in the darker colors, like this district here by Chicago. It's just goofy, like it's like the letter C. So you start to wonder, why would they draw that district line like that? Or this one over here, the district goes over top and then just runs down this road here, Highway 294, right over by Chicago, and then attaches back up and it runs along these roads so the district is like 20 feet wide in some areas. Like, why do they do that? And so you've got to start to look at, are there reasons that they're doing that to favor one political party over another? So when they call that packing, attempting to pack people of opposing party into as few districts as possible in order to swing the remaining districts in the majority party's favor. Again, they're trying to get or to favor one political party over another in a certain district. Because if they do that, say the Democrats are able to do that and put a bunch of Democrats in a district, or where they know they have more Democrats than Republicans, they know then for every election they're going to win in that district. And so they'll be guaranteed of sending a Democrat to the House of Representatives, favoring them. The term cracking, that's attempting to divide a concentration of opposing party in order to dilute their political power. So if the Democrats see that there's a congressional district in a state that there's a bunch of Republicans, the Republicans are always winning, they might try to redraw and split all those Republicans up into two different districts, giving them less political power. All right, so what could be the consequences of gerrymandering? The officials elected in those districts are not necessarily representative of the population in that district. That oftentimes occurs, which that's not what we want. We want our people being elected for certain areas. Like we want them kind of like the people in that district. We want them similar to the people in that district. It favors incumbents, people that have always been there. Incumbents being the person that holds the office, that is running for re-election. And it discourages challengers because people are like, well, that person's been there for years. They keep getting reelected because all the people there are Republicans or all the people there are Democrats. And so many people they don't want to challenge that person. It can negatively impact minority representation as well. All right, that's where we're going to cut it off there with this slideshow here. If I can get out of your end show. There we go. All right, so that's where we're at. Hey, what you guys need to do now is to hop back on Google Classroom, and there should be some an assignment posted in classwork dealing with the legislative branch that you need to get done for today. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, get a hold of me. You know how to do that. But that is your assignment for the rest of the hour. Enjoy.